Hello, my name's Marg Greenwood, and I'm a writer, and this is an extract from a book that I'm writing called Return to Muck, which is one of the small isles. But this extract is about the island of Gigha. And how do you get to Gigha is quite an interesting question, or at least the answer is quite interesting. The scenic route from Ayrshire, travelling by car, involves 3 ferries. My journey could have gone wrong at any point. From Ardrossan on the Ayrshire coast, I boarded the Calmac ferry to Brodick on Arran and drove from Brodick to Lochranza. I waited in the hot sun at Lochranza for the modest boat to Clonaic, a tiny, unheard-of place on the east coast of the Kintyre Peninsula. There were very few cars on this ferry. Then a short wild drive on a B-road to the main Kintyre road, where, an hour after the left turn, I arrived at Taenloen. There I could have left the car in the Taenloen car park and walked onto the ferry, but on my last trip I took the car with me to the ferry and onto the ferry to Gigha. Just a 20-minute trip. It did help in saving time between walk start-up points on the island, which is 7 miles long and about 1.5 miles at its widest point. Cycling is the best option on Gigha, but unfortunately my cycling days are over. I've written a poem which illustrates the romantic names of the seas I crossed that day, and those were the Firth of Clyde, Kilbrannan Sound, and the Sound of Gigha. It's called Musical Waters, 3 Ferries to Gigha. The first, the Firth of Clyde, a lisping motion, pizzicato, as befits a hissing puffer in the Parahandy days. Kilbrannan Sound, low-pitched, cool murmurs in E-flat minor, a lullaby cantabile in 6 smooth quavers to the bar. The Sound of Gigha, freer, D major moderato, a 20-minute piece. White horses swish like grace notes, rise above my excitement, reaching the finale. There being no hostel or bunkhouse on the island of Gigha, that's where I usually stay on my solo travels. But on Gigha, I first stayed in a B&B with Alistair MacNeill, a much respected resident. The MacNeill family has been on the island since around 1493. And Alistair and I had some fascinating talks about Gigha. He is one of 7 children, and he told me, I remember the day I went to school in 1948. We had slates and a slate pencil. This was long like a biro. As it wore down, it was much easier to work with. The school had memorable Christmas parties. The teacher played records on a wind-up gramophone, and she played the piano. She could be very strict. She had red hair and a tawse. Uncle Donald played the fiddle. The kids imitated him by pretending to play the fiddle with rulers. Alistair remembers James Horlick of bedtime drink fame, who bought Gigha, including Atchamore House, in 1944, and in particular Horlick's generosity to the islanders. Farms were done up. He employed people. Every household had at least 1 jar of Horlicks in their cupboards, and he put on parties for the workers, Alistair told me. I could tell from Alistair's memories of Sir James Horlick that he had a great deal of respect for him. This is not surprising when you look into Horlick's life history. Born in 1886, Horlick went to Oxford, developed a passion for cricket, and took 6 wickets for 90 runs against Harrow at Lord's. He also played cricket for Gloucestershire as an amateur. In the First World War, he joined the Coldstream Guards and served in France, the Balkans, and South Russia. He was mentioned in dispatches 4 times and awarded the Military Cross, British, the Légion d'honneur, France, and the White Eagle of Serbia. He, with his brother, set up the factory of Horlicks in 1908 in Slough in Berkshire, where the famous malted drink was made for around 100 years. He was the Conservative MP for Gloucester between 1923 and 1929. So he was 58 in 1944 when Gigha came up for sale, including Achimal House and Gardens. He had been searching around the west coast of Scotland for a suitable place to buy, where he could indulge in his passion for rhododendrons and azaleas. Gigha came up for sale, and he bought it. Sir James was an enthusiastic plantsman and wanted a garden where he could grow exotic shrubs, especially the more tender rhododendrons, which flourish in the relatively mild and frost-free climate. Again, Horlick excelled. He was awarded the Victoria Medal of Honour as a rhododendron breeder in 1963. We can deduce from this potted history that James Horlick threw himself into everything he set his mind to do. So, up the short road from the ferry, you pass the school, the post office cum shop, the church, and a hotel at the tiny village of Ardminish. Most visitors will head left, that is south, at the post office to walk about a mile to Achimal House and Gardens, which I did. Horlick lived in this house until he died. It's now in private hands and can't be visited, but the gardens can. Gigha was completely treeless in the 17th century. The first chronicler of island travels, Martin Martin, wrote in 1695, "This isle affords no wood of any kind, but a few bushes of juniper on the little hills." However, Hamish Haswell Smith writes in The Scottish Islands that Gigha has more trees than many Scottish islands, but cites scrub willow, prostrate juniper, sycamore, thorn, alder, birch, and hazel as thriving. In the 1940s, the gardens already contained mature trees planted by previous owners, which made for a luxurious canopy over a large area. By 1970, thanks to Horlick's intense enthusiasm, the gardens were a wonderful kaleidoscope of rhododendrons, camellias, azaleas, and other subtropical shrubs. On his death in 1972, Horlick left much of his plant collection to the National Trust for Scotland and a small endowment to fund the propagation of rare species, but sadly the house and gardens slithered into a decline. He is buried in the new graveyard of Kilchatton Church. After talking with Alistair, I couldn't wait to visit the gardens.